So today I want to spend a little bit of time talking to you about vocabulary tiers and how to use them in your instruction. Our essential question for today is, how do good readers learn content-specific vocabulary? And I wanted to point you to a video on Teaching Channel on College Talk as a way to improve students' vocabulary. And so if you choose to watch this video, which you're not required to, I want you to think about how this relates to best practice in the readings that you have for this week, and how will you use this in your own practice if you chose to do so. So when we think about vocabulary instruction, we can think about vocabulary as a pyramid, and that the English language is divided into 3 tiers or 3 levels of words. And this is a framework that was developed by Beck and McCowan. Your Tier 1 is your basic and general vocabulary, Tier 2 is your high frequency words, and Tier 3 are your academic vocabulary or domain-specific terms. So to think about that in another sense, your Tier 1 is your known common words. These are basic words that most children know before they enter school. However, you can't assume that all at-risk students really know Tier 1 words. Tier 2 words are words that appear frequently in text and for which students already have a conceptual understanding. These are the words that we want them to teach, that we want to teach in the classroom. They're high frequency or high utility words. And then Tier 3 are uncommon words that typically are associated with a specific domain. They're also called technical words or low frequency words. So if we are teaching Tier 1 and Tier 2 words, we want to pronounce the words, provide a student-friendly definition, and then use the word in a contextually rich sentence, teaching our students vocabulary in context versus giving them a list of terms, having them define them, memorize them, and then take a test on Friday really is the way to go. So teaching in this context-rich approach, because research will show that if students have a contextually rich experience with vocabulary or a context that they can refer back to, then they really have really absorbed the word and made it their own. They've latched on to it because they have something to refer back to, as opposed to just a vocabulary list of memorization and then testing on Fridays. So with level 2 words, we want to do all 3 of those things, but then we also want to have them have an activity that requires them to activate prior knowledge or compare and contrast meanings of those Tier 2 high frequency words. For Tier 3, we want to pronounce the word. We want to provide the student-friendly definition, the contextually rich sentence, the activity, but then also allow the students to start manipulating the meanings of the words, making inferences, searching for application, removing suffixes from the words, looking at prefixes and suffixes, thinking about Latin and Greek roots and affixes, and how we can manipulate language is something that's very helpful with Tier 3. So for example, if we're thinking about a Tier 2 high frequency word, we could think about the word justify. And it's found in science, social studies, English, it's found in mathematics. It's a word that appears in a various contexts and topics. And so it's one of these general academic words. You can also think of it as cross-curricular. Our students are going to see that word throughout their day multiple times. Now, on the other hand, isotope or tectonic plates are Tier 3 words. They're very academic domain specific. They're low frequency that appear in a specific content area or field. Ultimately, though, we want vocabulary to be a continual focus. We want to teach vocabulary explicitly in the classroom. Vocabulary is one of the areas where a lot of times teachers don't teach explicitly as much. They assume that sometimes students are going to absorb language through comprehension. But we know that if comprehension is not there, because the students don't understand what they're seeing on the page, they're skipping every few words, then they're not going to comprehend what they're reading. They're not going to make sense of it. And so they're just going to continue reading but not know what they're reading about, or not being able to tell us what they're reading about or make sense of it. So we want to teach vocabulary explicitly. We also want to read a wide variety of genres in our classrooms, introduce our students to lots of different texts so that they're exposed to a lot of different types of vocabulary. We want to use robust vocabulary in our teaching and through everyday routines, which goes back to that college talk video I mentioned earlier. Encourage rich vocabulary when students write and speak. Promote word consciousness or meta awareness of words. And be a wordsmith. Model a passion for language and lifelong word learning. When you come across new words that are really cool and interesting, sharing those out with your students is really important. So ultimately, be purposeful in your vocabulary instruction, be planful in your vocabulary instruction, and be playful with words in your classroom. One way that you can teach vocabulary is through context clues, and these are hints that an author gives to help define a difficult or unusual word. And these are important because most of one's vocabulary is gained through reading. And so we want to teach our students about context clues in the classroom. So as a reminder about context clues, you have a synonym or repeat context clue in which the word and the definition then appears in the sentence. An antonym or contrast context clue, which has the opposite meaning, which can reveal the meaning of an unknown word. A definition context clue, where the explanation is provided for you, or an example context clue, where specific examples are used to then define the term. And you see all of the examples here. Antonym signal words include but or in contrast, however, instead of, unlike, and yet. Signals could be is defined as, means, the term, and then the term is bold-faced or italicized or set off with commas. Synonyms can be an other word that is also known as, sometimes called, and those are some examples of signal words to teach your students. Now, instructional implications, we really want to teach Tier 3 words as the need arises for comprehension in the specific content areas because students are generally unfamiliar with those vocabulary terms. So if we're teaching a unit on the American Revolution, we have Tier 3 terminology that we want to teach our students that solely show up in social studies so they can understand that unit, but we also want to teach the Tier 2 as well. 3 ways we can do that, or really 2 ways we can do that, and then also remembering to teach Tier 2 words, is creating content vocabulary lists. So when you're thinking about your instruction and your unit, what are the words that students should know in order to make sense of what they're reading, from the must know, which is your Tier 2s, to the already know, which is Tier 1. Providing them multiple exposures to the words and practice using them, and then remembering to teach Tier 2 words in the classroom. And another way to do all of this is to use word sorts, which are really the heart of word study. And this is allowing students to make sense of our orthographic system by understanding how things are similar and different. And so you have open sorts and closed sorts. Open sorts are where you do not have specific directions as to how to sort the words. Closed sorts, you have specific categories that you're sorting words into. But word sorts allow students to examine words in relation to others so they can see consistencies within our written language system. So I hope this information on vocabulary was helpful for you. And remembering that you have some vocabulary readings this week. And so looking at the module, you have 2 articles. You have your reader response. Please pay attention to the literacy task stream template for your lesson plan, for your writing plan that's due. And then also please pay attention to the Assessment 2 study guide.